I failed course 3. Yes, I did. And in my opinion, that is the hardest exam in the entire program. And in this video, I'm going to tell you guys why and what to do about it. If you're new here, I'm Shiva. I'm a realtor myself. And in the last 2 years, I've been able to personally help a few thousand people to pass their real estate exams and ultimately get their license. And so in this video, I want to talk to you guys about why course 3 is the hardest exam. Now, if you've been following from my last video, you're going to remember I gave you guys my advice on what to do if you fail an exam. For me, the exam that I failed was course 3. And so I'm going to break down exactly what the structure is like and why is it so difficult and what you can do about it so you don't end up like me and you can actually pass on the first try. Okay, first of all, let's take a look at exactly what are we dealing with for the course 3 exam. So course 3 has 115 questions. It's a 3-hour exam. You need a 75% to pass. They're all MCQs. And we got 9 modules in total. You might get a few math questions. Some people get some get none, but they should be pretty easy. You don't really need to study for those. Now keep in mind, although we're dealing with only 9 modules and it seems short compared to maybe C2 and C4, which has like 20, 15 modules, that doesn't make C3 any easier. And let me tell you why. C3 is deceivingly short. It is short in terms of the module length, but on the exam, it's going to be very, very detailed. And they're going to ask you details from all kinds of things. Now, this exam specifically touches on things from condos, to rural areas, to multi-unit properties, to landlords and tenants. Those are kind of the main categories. And then they also go into different forms like the agreement to lease, the condo APS, and a lot of other repetition from C1 and C2. The issue, however, is they're going to test you on those specific dates, the deadlines, the regulations, the rules, and in very specific scenarios. And so unlike C1 and C2, where maybe you just memorize a few stuff and maybe you're just copying and pasting, C3 is very application based. And so every question is different, every scenario is different, and you've got to take the knowledge that you learned and apply it to the scenario, which is pretty hard for a lot of people. And so without going in too much in depth into exactly what concepts they're touching on, you're going to see a lot about the condo corporations, rules and regulations for new condo buyers, all of the conditions and clauses and things you need for the condo APS. It goes into also the rural properties. So everything to do with rural properties, the farmers' laws, and especially shore roads, and then into landlords and tenants for condos and for normal residential markets. And so there's a lot of topics. It might seem shorter, like I said, with module-wise, but you've got to know these topics really, really well to even get like a 76% on this exam. And so my advice is start from the major topics that are the most important and then narrow your focus from there. So start by learning exactly what is a condo corporation, for example, and how do we actually make it, and then go into details of what's the deadlines, what's the dates, what's the rules and regulations. Now, if you guys want a full breakdown of all of the modules and all the specific things that you need to know for this entire exam, and you guys can get the full free course 3 checklist below. I put the link there, download it, and basically it has all the concepts you need module by module for your exam. Last point before I move on, I said that there's going to be repetition from C1 and C2. Now, when I say repetition, I don't just mean like some concepts which they're going to repeat in the course. They actually might not mention it at all in the course, but they will test you on those on the exam. Crazy, I know. And so if you are doing this exam, make sure you brush up on C1 and C2 because they might not put it in C3 modules, but you might get a few questions on your exam from those concepts. Okay, but what makes this exam especially annoying is the exam itself, meaning the exam MCQs, so the questions. Now, all of your exams are going to be MCQs, but what makes this one especially annoying is all of these questions are tricky and difficult to answer. The problem is when everybody uses these words to describe the C3 exam, they don't actually say what does tricky and difficult to understand even mean. And so when you break it down, the MCQs for C3 are only considered tricky and hard because they are not asked in a straightforward method and they're very application based. And so what I mean by that is they might not give you all the details you need. So you got to do a little bit of inference and assumptions. They might give you more details that you actually don't need to distract you. And they'll make sure the questions are asked in a very specific scenario where you cannot simply regurgitate a memorized answer and you're gonna have to think for yourself. All of these combined makes this exam extremely confusing, hard to understand, And sometimes you got to read it 4 or 5 times to even get what are they asking. So my advice is twofold. First, be prepared for the exam. Now, when I did my exam, I was overconfident and I did not prepare as well because C1 and C2 was a breeze. So I thought, by this time, passing those on my first try, C3 is going to be very, very easy. Do not make that mistake and study as if it is your hardest exam, because it just might be. You have to treat this exam differently than the other courses, because you can't simply copy and paste or practice a bunch of questions and hope to pass this exam. And this is partly the issue, because for C1 and C2, a lot of people were used to just practicing multiple choice questions and going straight to the exam and passing. But with C3, exam questions are so different that these online tools actually don't even get it right. And so if you are using things like Pass It and Minicram, I would take a little bit of discretion, use them, they're still helpful if you like, but you might find them to be a little bit more, difficult or different than what you're going to see on exam day. So my advice is make sure you're covering all of your grounds. If you are using one set of materials, try to use 2. Try to cross-reference those notes so that you're actually learning the concepts, and don't just try to memorize, practice multiple choice questions, because those are not going to get you the pass. You really need to know the concepts well, and you really need to study the deadlines, the dates, and the details, which sometimes are skipped over or only said once or twice in the entire course. My second advice is master the art of the MCQ. Learn exactly how to answer MCQs so that even when you don't know the answer, you can still have a good chance of getting it right. Truth is, as much as people have you believe, knowing your material is not enough to pass this exam. You've got to be able to answer the MCQs and to kind of navigate through them despite knowing your material really, really well. I've had a lot of students before who could teach the material better than me, right? I would do private and group sessions with them, and they knew everything to the T, by the book. They memorized all the dates, all the details. Like there was nothing that they didn't know. The problem was when they got to the exam, they failed. And I've had those type of people fail more than the others because they just weren't exam takers. Now, being an exam taker just means that you got to practice MCQs and practice a strategy that actually helps you get through those types of questions. So if you guys want me to do a MCQ breakdown, how to actually answer MCQ questions, let me know in the comments below and I'll make another video on that later. But to give you guys a breakdown of the 2 major ones I think are the most useful is number 1, you've got to get good at skimming for key information. Now, a lot of people, when they're doing these questions, they get anxious or they get nervous and they feel like they've got to read the entire question or they're going to miss something. Truth is, you're not. Truth is, the exam questions are meant to trick you. So everything there you've got to treat as hostile. It might not be for you, and it might be adding details or taking away details to try and confuse you. So learn to skim information, learn to look for the info that you need, and learn to ignore the information that you're not going to need for that question. It might seem weird at first that you're skipping some of the question, but truth is you can always go back, right? I'm just saying on the second pass through, try to skim, not to save you time, but to save you your focus. And then if you feel like you still don't know what's going on, then go ahead, read the entire thing and see if that helps. The second tip I would say as well is make sure you guys are thinking of your own answer before actually answering these MCQs. A lot of people are simply not able to explain concepts out loud. That is a problem. The reason why is because if you are doing this exam and you can only answer the question when you read the question and the entire MCQ choices, then you're riddled for failure. You are simply not going to do well on the exam because all the questions are made to trick you. And you might pass. I'm not saying you won't, but the truth is it's a lot harder for you to pass, and it's a lot easier for you to get a higher score if you thought of your own answer before. And so what I mean by that is if you're reading a multiple choice question, read whatever it's asking you, and think, what concept and lesson is it testing me on? And then try to remember whatever you can about that concept. And so for example, if it's giving me a question about a condition that a buyer is putting on the APS to protect them from the seller, doing something wrong with the contract, let's say. They might ask you, what type of condition is it? Is it true condition precedent? Is it condition precedent? Is it condition subsequent? And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to read that question and I'm going to first think, okay, what qualities does this have and what qualities does this match when I compare it to condition precedent, true condition precedent, or condition subsequent. That's going to help you before you read the answers, because the answers are going to say it must be condition precedent because blah, blah, blah. And that blah, 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 that reason they give you is going to make you think, wait, that could be right, and maybe I'm confusing myself, maybe I mixed those up, but maybe you didn't. And so truth is, you're not really going to know whether it's tricking you or not, or whether it's the right answer or not if you're guessing like that. Your best chances is to stick with your guns, prepare well enough, and trust yourself to know the answer before reading the MCQ answers. So yes, C3 is very, very difficult, not only because of the material itself, not only because of the details, but because of the exam questions and the multiple choice questions that they give you. So make sure you prepare for all of it. Make sure you're studying your material down to the T. Make sure you guys grab that checklist below if you need it, and make sure you practice doing exam multiple choice questions. Okay, if you guys haven't already, be sure to check out my last video where I cover exactly what to do if you fail an exam. And if you guys are still having trouble with this course or another course, you guys can also check out my monthly group sessions below. That might be important for you. Okay, that's it for today's video. Comment below what else you want me to cover, and I will see you guys in the next one.